right, we've got 20 minutes left of NAB, and we're going to be spending it talking about Maya 2016 Extension 2. Awesome release for us. It's available now. We'll announce it at the show. And there's several things that we're going to be talking about today. Artist-friendly tools. My experience, that's what we've been trying to push forward in the last few releases, is making the tools more accessible, making them easier to use, and increasing the functionality for our existing user base. So what we're going to be looking at today are three things. We're going to be looking at faster character workflows. We now have really, really easy ways of getting characters up and moving inside of Maya using a quick rig tool, as well as some really nice advanced improvements have been made to the ability for Maya to handle deformations and being able to do modifications to deformed characters to specifically address problem areas very fast. We're also going to be checking out the new render setup, which brings a modern approach to render setup. This is a name-based system, so it elegantly handles the changing data in your pipeline very efficiently and stably, which is really the key thing here. And we're going to finish off talking quickly about the motion design tools if we have enough time. We got started 10 minutes late, so it's going to be a bit of a rush to get through all that. So we're going to be using some assets that were generated by myself and some designs that were made by my colleague, Marcel Dejean, and some help with some contractors. And we'll just jump into Maya and begin checking this stuff out now. So this is what we want to do. We want to get this character in our scene moving quickly. How do we do that? Well, we're going to be using the Quick Rig tool to do that. So we'll select some geometry that we want to have a bone structure made inside of and some rigging operations done, and we'll jump up to our rigging section, and we will just go ahead and create a Quick Rig. So what Quick Rig is going to do is you could use the automatic button and just say auto rig, and it'll basically go through and do it in one click. For this example, I'm actually going to be using the guided method. So we're going to go step by step because this will just kind of really show you how Quick Rig is getting to its end result. We're not really going to be modifying it too much along the way. I'm going to be using this more as an educational tool to explain to you what Quick Rig is doing underneath it all. So step one is add the geometry in that you want to work with. Step two is specifying what type of algorithm you want it to use to generate the guides. We have several different algorithms inside of here. If you click on the plus or the question mark next to that, it's going to give you a quick description of what that algorithm's good at doing. You know, what type of geometry is that going to excel at trying to find the areas to position the bones. I'm going to leave it on imperfect mesh for this example. So we can go ahead and we can specify the resolution, some guide settings like is your character symmetrical, how many spine joints do you want, neck joints, things like that. We'll leave these all at the defaults and we'll just hit create and update. So what Maya's doing now is it's going through and it's evaluating that geometry and it's trying to figure out where it should be positioning bones, like where's the ankle, where's the knee, where's the hip, where are your spine joints. It gives me these little locators, and those are just guides at this point. So it gives me the option now to make modifications to those, which is the third section, which is the user adjustments. So if I want the spine joint to be a little bit higher, I can just grab that guide and move it up a bit. Or if I want the arm to be pushed over a little bit, I can just simply grab that guy, push it into where I think that elbow should be, and if I need to mirror that, I have a tool right here in the user interface to do that type of function. Very, very fast, very easy. So once you have your guides aligned and where you think they should be, the next section is creating the skeleton and the rig. So you can have it make just a skeleton that you'll then put your own custom rig on, or you can have it create a skeleton with a control rig. There's some options for the skeleton creation, like is it going to be in the T-pose correction or not. So what that means is if your character was modeled like in the A-pose with the arms down, this tool will find all that stuff. It'll basically rig it up, and then it'll put it back into the T-pose, which is great if you're trying to do anything with motion capture, because often that's going to be your 0 point or your calibration point is going to be the T-pose. So I'm going to leave these under defaults. We'll go ahead and we'll say create update. Maya's going to go through. It's going to build a skeletal structure for me, and it's going to add onto this a human IK rig. And the human IK rig is kind of interesting because it allows you to manipulate and modify your character using a very sophisticated rig, again, very quickly. So if I grab this character's arm and I begin moving it around, you'll notice it has the ability to transfer that energy all the way through the arm, past his body. Oops, we haven't rigged it yet. Let's go ahead and get that guy back, and we'll finish up the last step, which is creating the skinning. So right now what we've done is we've made this quick rig, but we haven't made a relationship between the skeletal structure and the geometry. Those vertices haven't been associated to those bones yet. So we'll go ahead and we'll just hit create update on this guy. We're going to be using Geodesic Voxel binding to do this operation, which really is sort of the go-to default choice. The reason that is the default choice is because it's honestly the best algorithm that we have. It handles imperfect geometry really efficiently, and it also solves traditional problem areas where weighting gets difficult, like in between the legs or in between the fingers, where bones might influence the wrong vertices. So this does a really good first take. And normally it'll get you about 90% of the way there. There's always going to be some refinement, or most of the times there's going to be some refinement work that you want to do. So you can see here's that HIK rig being able to position that character very quickly and very efficiently. So let's look at what happens if we just display only our bones and we go in here and start to rotate this arm up. So as I'm spinning this arm around, you can see that I do have some problem areas. Like I said, that initial algorithm is going to get me 90% of the way, but you can still see that that doesn't really look that great. There's some problems underneath here, and it's kind of caving in on the top. Or if we push this guy down, you can see that it's kind of pinching in underneath his arm. So traditionally what you'd do is you'd go through and you'd start painting weights associated with each joint. You know, how much is this joint pulling those vertices along? And you'd be painting weights on 5 or 6 joints to fix that one problem area. Now we can use a space pose-based deformer to fix that. We can basically put the model in a position that we know it needs to get to, and we can then model or sculpt the actual shape that that piece of geometry should achieve when it's in that joint rotation values. Very straightforward, very easy to use, and it's super, super fast. So let's check it out in context. We'll go ahead and we'll get this guy back to his stance pose, and we can close this down, and we'll bring up our new pose editor. And we're just going to add this joint in as something that we want to do this pose-based deformation or this pose space deformation to. So we'll go ahead and we'll rotate our arm up. And I'm not going to spend too much time painting amazing looking corrective shapes, but it's more to get the concept across. So I'll grab something like this brush here, the sculpting brush. These brushes were based on the Mudbox brushes. They're very, very high quality brushes, and they're perfect for working on these base meshes directly inside of Maya. This is something that we put in 2016, knowing where we were going. We needed really high quality brushes to have a good pose space deformation workflow, and that's been a multi-year kind of effort here. So now you're kind of started seeing where we were going with this. So we're in the edit mode. I'll grab that grab brush. We'll just increase my brush size, and I'm going to use that grab brush to just start kind of pushing this arm up here, kind of cave that guy back in and maybe do something like that. That looks pretty good. I might go in here and just lift this area up, just jump over here and kind of pull that area up. Now I can go in here and I can use my new smooth target brush to start to smooth that area out a little bit, just kind of feather that in a little bit more with that smooth target brush. And I could do the same thing up here. I could smooth that region out on the top of the shoulder. And I'm really just trying to get something that looks a little bit better than it did before. I might go back into that grab brush. If I right-click, I'd say last tool and grab that grab brush and sort of push that over there and swipe last tool to smooth target. So you can really quickly jump back and forth between these to sort of get your character, deforming the way you want. I might actually pull that up and pull that out. So that looks kind of cool. It's looking much better than it did before. And now if we turn off the edit mode and we start to go back to our rotation for this arm, you can see that it now interpolates through that, and it achieves that end effect really, really nicely, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. So the last thing that I want to talk about is we can go in here into the advanced section, and we can start to add in different ways of interpolating between those guys. So if we wanted to adjust the bias of the curve moving from one to the other, you could highlight that, and you could say instead of linear, let's just do a Gaussian. We'll auto-adjust the fall-off region on that, or I can sit here and dial that in as much as I want or as little as I want to really have complete user control over how that interpolation is going to happen or work. Pretty straightforward. So let's look at some other improvements that have been made to the character workflow inside of Maya 2016 Extension 1. And what we want to look at is some improvements that were made to dealing with blend shapes or morph targets. We now have a new pose editor or a new shape editor, which gives us the ability to do some really nice things. Let's check that out in context. So this replaces the old blend shape window. So you can see this is a new UI for it. It allows us to do some really kind of handy things. Like I've got a blink left, pretty straightforward, and a blink right. But I can now actually take those two guys, because often you're going to want to have one slider that works multiple blend shapes. Well, we can do that because we can group things. So if I go ahead and I hit a group on that, I now have a multiplier slider of my left and right. And this is just a simple drag and drop operation. If I want to change what's in the groups or what's out of the groups, it's really that simple as just dragging and dropping objects inside of there. So kind of consistent workflow across Maya now with this drag and drop and foldering operations. We can also solo these guys at any given time. So I could say, you know what? I don't want to see all the effects of the other sliders. Let me just solo that one guy out. So obviously to get out of that, we just unsolo it. So that's really a quick example of a couple things you can do with that. We've also made some nice improvements to the way the deformer works in the shape editing window. So things like combination targets. Well, what's that mean? It means basically I can have two sliders driving to a third shape or a combination. So when their values are both reached to a value of 1, it's going to achieve this new special shape that's a combination of all the sliders added together. So what's that look like if we start to play around with it? It's pretty straightforward. We'll just go in here and we'll add in 100% of MAD, 100% of pucker, and we're going to say, you know what? I want to have a new shape when those two sliders are met to 100% value. So we'll just go ahead and we'll jump into the edit mode. And for this guy, we're kind of short on time. So again, I'm just going to do something that's very clear that what's happening with that combo target, something like that, we can turn off that edit mode. And you can see that if I have 100% matte and 0 pucker, it's not dialing in anything of that new shape that we just made. But as I start to bring up the pucker, it starts to also go into that combo shape. So that's really the effect of what those combos bring to the table is basically third targets that are achieved based on the values of those two sliders. Really fast, really easy, and actually really quite cool. So the last thing that we want to talk about is the changes that were made to the in-between. So let's go ahead and what's an in-between? Well, an in-between is another morph or another shape that the object will pass through on its way to a given shape. So you can see if we go from our rest pose to our mad pose, it's just a kind of very straight blend, right? Just a straight morph. A lot of times you're going to want to have it go through another shape, kind of pass through and in between. So how do you do that? It's very straightforward. Just set your slider up somewhere, go in there and say, let's create an in-between. And for this example, we're going to add the relative in-between, which is new in 2016 extension 2. It gives me the ability to adjust with a fall off here instead of like the interpolation, how it's going to pass through that. So is it going to have a fast in, fast out, linear move, things like that, or we can make a custom profile curve to adjust that. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and we'll grab the edit brush for that guy. We'll grab this grab brush. And again, I'm just going to have him, oop, that is a little big. Let's just undo that and decrease that brush size. So as he goes into that mad face, I want him to kind of push his lips out a little bit and maybe raise this up and raise that up, something like that. So I'm just trying to get some tweaks inside of here that are really visible. We turn the edit off for that guy, and you can see as I pass through this in between now, he does that extra shape. So it makes it not just feel like a straight linear move from one to the other. Super fast, very easy to do inside of Maya 2016 extension 2. So now that we've checked that out, let's jump over to the next section or topic that we wanted to talk about, which is render setup. And this is something that it's so cool. Render setup is a name-based system. That means it can handle changing assets in your scene elegantly. File referencing works with it really well. If you're dynamically adding objects to your scene, it also works with it really well. So let's walk you through how that works in context. So we'll bring up our new render settings window. And in our render settings window, the first thing we want to do is create a layer. As soon as we create that layer by hitting the plus sign, we can view it by clicking the eyeball. There's nothing on this layer. That's why the screen goes blank. So what we have to do now is start to populate these render layers with objects. And we do that through collection. So we'll create a new collection, and we can add objects to these collections in 2 different ways. So we can simply drag and drop an object in there. It's going to add it in. As soon as we do that, you can see the building shows up. It's actually... It doesn't have any lights in the scene. I've got hardware fog on there. That's why it's got that little bit of grayness happening in the background there. But essentially, that's our first way of adding an object to a collection. The other way of adding objects to collections is with names. And the names are dynamically updated. This is one of the things that makes it able to handle changing assets in your pipeline efficiently and elegantly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add in dr star to add in these dreadnought future racers in the background. And by hitting dr star, you can see that it's added in all these objects that are named with that. Now, like I said, this is a name-based system. I dragged and dropped the word building in there. That was done really quickly, but it's basically all that's really done is in the include section, it's put the name building, right? So I could have typed building, and it would have added it. So you can work both ways very quickly with drag and drop, or by using these tokens and wildcards. So let's say you want to get rid of something. You know, you've got 1,000 props in your scene. Director comes in and says, I love everything, but that one picture I hate. You could just basically say minus the name of that object. So how do we see something like that? Let's check it out. If we don't like this ship in this collection, we could just do minus, and that guy has the word back in it. You can see it's right there, dreadnought back. We'll just do minus star back. So now if I hit return, I just subtracted that one object from there. This is really what it's all about, is this name-based workflow. So let's check this out. The next thing I want to do is, you've done a render setup. You've spent a lot of time getting it segmented exactly how you want. You've got some overrides happening in some places, and you've got 100 shots in your scene to work with. With render setup, we can save templates out. They're simple JSON files. So what this means is you can apply this work to one scene and import it into all the other shots that you have in your show, and it's automatically going to populate itself because, again, it's just grepping your file and looking for names. It's going to go through. If those names are met, those conditions or those wildcards are met, they're going to get added to the layer. So it will auto-build itself dynamically on the fly, which is really cool. So I'm going to just import in a template called light. So as soon as we do that, notice that now on this render layer, those guys brightened up, and that's because that lights layer that we just imported in, or that lights collection that we just imported in, is, again, using some wildcards. So dynamically updated and added my lights into my scene that fast, that simple. So this is where it really gets interesting. When we start to do overrides or tweaks to these collections, director comes in and says, love it, I want it 10% brighter, 20% brighter. How do we do that? Well, we add an override to these, and we can do relative overrides or absolute overrides. So in this example, I want to pump all the lights in my scene up by 2 times or something like that. So all you have to do is go to your attribute editor and grab the attribute that you want to have modified. An example here, we're doing relative. So it's going to take its base level, 2 on one light, maybe 3 on the other light, and we're going to add to it. We're not going to reset these guys to the one value. We're going to take where they're at, and we're just going to add to them. So you drag and drop that on there. We now have this relative intensity override. I can put up a value of 2 there, and just like that, we've now bumped all the lights in our scene, because all it's doing is it's really looking through and it's saying, every light in here that has this attribute intensity, well, that's what it's going to do. It's going to find that intensity value on all those and just update it. And at any given time, you can turn on and off the effect. You can solo, all the kind of basic things you'd expect in a layer system to happen right here. So the last thing that we want to do with the render layers, or the render, actually, we've only got 6 minutes. So we're going to move forward. Actually, we'll do it. We have time. Let's create another layer, another collection here. And on that collection, we're going to call it ships. I want to do a shader override. So let's go ahead and add these guys in here. We'll add all our ships into this guy, and what we're going to do is we're going to create an override on this, and we're going to create a shader override. So what a shader override is going to do is it's going to take everything that's on that layer, and it's going to put a new shader on it. Very, very straightforward. So we'll go to our surface section here, and on that guy, we'll put a surface shader on it, and we'll just make it red. So you want to do like a disco pass or something like that. And again, at any given time, I can say, you know what? I don't want to see the effect of that. I want to get back to my original object. So that's really what this is all about. The render setup, again, elegantly handles changing topology, changing objects, everything in your scene. And that brings us to our point, or our next thing that we need to talk about, which is we've made an announcement. Autodesk has acquired Solid Angle. This is very exciting news for us. This is the Arnold renderer. It's important to know that it's business as normal for the Solid Angle team. They are joining us. They are going to continue. Staff is going to get actually ramped up. And Solid Angle sells to other vendors, and that's going to remain the same. So it's still going to be able to, if you've got Houdini and you're using Arnold, awesome. You're going to continue to get that. We will not be turning that stuff off. Obviously, Cinema 4D artists also love Arnold. It's worth mentioning that Maya currently ships with Mentalray. That continues. The extension 2 that's available at the show, announced today, that you can download now, has Mentalray embedded in it. We're still looking at our options on how we're going to get Arnold into Maya and into Max. But as it is now, it's business as normal. We haven't made those decisions yet. It's also worth mentioning that Maya currently ships with Mentalray, and we've always had an open render approach. So we've supported the Arnold guys and the V-Ray guys, RenderMan, Redshift. That will continue moving forward. Even though we have acquired Solid Angle, we still know that your pipeline very well may be a V-Ray pipeline. We don't want that to change. Well, we'd like you to buy Arnold, I'm sure. But if you guys are going to stay with all the other guys, awesome. They're great. They're great partners of ours, and we love them. So the last thing that I need to mention really quickly is the fact that we also made another announcement, which is we've partnered with Google and the Google Cloud Platform to allow you to render on the cloud. So Google Zinc will, inside of Maya, let you hit 30,000 cores today. You could just ramp right up. It handles the data prep for you all automatically in the background. It's a super elegant workflow. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, go onto YouTube and Google, just your Google Zinc Cloud Renderer, and there's be some really nice tutorials that are up there that show you how it works, and it's all handled for you, again, seamlessly in the background. So with that said, we've got about 4 minutes until they're going to tell me that I have to get off the stage and the show is over. So we'll go back to our original scene view here, and we're going to talk about motion design super, super quick. So this is something that's really awesome inside of Maya 2016 Extension 2, and that's the ability for us to do very design-oriented, procedural-based animation. So what we want to do is create a globe, and I'm going to do it in 3 minutes. It's going to be blazingly fast, and you'll be impressed, hopefully. All right, so we've got a cube in our scene. We want to begin moving that around procedurally. So the first thing we're going to do is create a motion design network. With that motion design network made, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to increase the number of objects in this guy. So I can just tell it, you know what, I want a lot of those cubes in there. We can switch our distribution model to different types of distribution models. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a polygon cube that's going to ultimately become my sphere that these guys are going to get attached to. So by creating this polygon cube, we're going to go and move it up here a little bit into that sort of little glowy area. And we're just going to smooth this guy. So by smoothing it, it's going to give me very even tessellation. So we'll go into our modeling section, we'll go into our mesh section, and we'll just say smooth, and we can smooth that guy out, I don't know, maybe 5 times, something like that. So that's now going to become the object that's going to make each one of those cubes position. So we're going to drag and drop our sphere that we just made into our mesh input. As soon as we do that, you can see those cubes are randomly scattered on there. What we want to do is, instead of randomly scattering it, we want to go to our face center and we'll flood smooth that. So that's how fast it was for me to start to get those cubes sort of lined up on that guy. So we'll just turn this guy down and make it a little bit smaller. Something like that looks kind of cool. So the next thing we need to do is we need to texture map this. We want to have that cube just be the continents. The cubes are where the continents are, where the oceans are. We don't want any cubes. So how do we do that? It's very easy to do. We go in here and we just say, let's add a visibility node onto that guy. The visibility, you could obviously randomly adjust the strength, or you could step through it. In this example, we're going to texture map it using a bitmap image. So we'll say File, we'll jump this guy out here and grab that black and white image of the Earth. That's going down the y-axis by default, which isn't exactly what we want. We actually want to be using UVs to do that, and I need to get some UVs of a sphere. Easiest way to do that is to actually just create another sphere. So with that sphere made, we can just kind of slide this guy up here, and that's going to be what's going to project our UVs onto that other mesh. So we'll go into our UV mode. You can see the helper hasn't been attached yet. So we'll just drag and drop this guy into there, and we can hide this sphere. And in a matter of a few seconds, we were able to create this really cool little cube-based world on that bitmapped image. Now here's where it's awesome. This is all procedural animation based, right? If I want to go in here and want to start having this stuff moving around or doing something kind of fun, I can just simply add in a noise, do something like that, hit my playback on this guy, we'll cue up our head, we'll put this out to 300 or 3000 and hit interactive playback. So it's playing back in real time in Maya Viewport 2.0, and I can just sit here and dial in how I want that guy to look. Maybe I want it to wiggle around more in Y, and at any given time, I could drop that strength down, have it build the cube, randomly drop that strength down, or that's basically it. So thank you so much for wrapping the show with us here at the Autodesk booth. That's Maya 2016 Extension 2. It's available today. We talked about how much easier it is for generalists to get up to speed in this tool using those new awesome character workflows. We saw the new render setup that elegantly handles changing data in your pipeline. And we finished off with the new motion design toolkit that brings an amazing set of procedural animation tools that we know designers are going to love. Cheers, everyone.